Good morning, participants. My name is Jean Dupré. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Education and Training at the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. I wish to welcome you to the 2020 Summer School for Diplomats on Nuclear Disarmament and Non-proliferation. This school has been held many times since 2013 in the lovely city of Mexico City. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we cannot all meet there and enjoy the wonderful and warm hospitality of our Mexican colleagues. It is my distinct honor to be the co-host of the course, together with Ms. Paola Ramírez Valenzuela, who's the Deputy Director General for Disarmament, Non-proliferation and Arms Control in the Secretariat for Foreign Affairs in Mexico. And I would really, from the outset, like to thank Paola and her colleagues for the wonderful cooperation that we've had to set up this course. So let me briefly just explain for those who may not have dealt with Zoom webinars, but I'm sure by now everyone around the world are experts in Zoom. The course is set up as a webinar, and therefore participants, we ask you kindly that you raise your hands in the question and answer button, which is on the bottom of your screen. Type a question in there. You'll be able to use your microphone if you so wish. Just let me know. The reason that we're doing that is that we have 70 participants online. And if we have 70 little screens, it makes it really difficult for everyone to see each other. But you will see the panelists. The panelists will have full access to video and sound. And the panelists, you will also be able to see any questions raised by the participants. Between Paola, myself, and my young colleague, Nomsa Ndongwe, who is a former Zimbabwean diplomat and currently a master's degree student here, we will monitor the Q&A box and let the speakers know if there are any questions. If you have any trouble setting up or you can't hear, please use the chat function to let us know if you experience trouble. We will get back to you in that way. Don't use the Q&A for that purpose, because then we get a bit confused. So please make sure that if you speak, that you unmute your microphone, and after you've spoken, please mute it again, because the background noise sometimes is quite disturbing. With that technical introduction, let me introduce very, very briefly the course. The course will run over 2 weeks. The reason is we don't want to have people sit in the webinar for several hours. So we hope to do it for 2 weeks, about 3 hours every day. And it will consist of a number of modules as you have distributed. So the first module, after the opening remarks this morning, and also remarks from Ms. Nakamitsu, the Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs from the United Nations, and Ambassador Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA. We will start with Module 1, and that will feature Dr. William Potter, the Founding Director of the James Martin Center, and followed by our keynote speaker, Ambassador Gustavo Slaughter, who, as you know, is the President of the 10th NPT Review Conference. And then we will have a quick wrap-up. So every day, speaking of that wrap-up, Paola and I will have a very, very brief opening in the mornings for 5 minutes, just to make sure that everyone is online, everyone understands how the course is run, and then we will have approximately 15 minutes at the end of the day session, just to take stock and to notify participants what will happen the next day. So Module 2 will focus on nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, and fissile material. We have a number of very interesting speakers on that. And I'm also very pleased to announce that on Wednesday, we will feature Hibakusha, one of the survivors of the Nagasaki atomic bombing, Ms. Masako Wada. Module 3 is focused on the NPT. That will follow the testimony of Ms. Wada, and that will also feature Ambassador Slobonin, Ambassador Anneke Thunberg, a colleague of mine from the CTBTO days, who is now the ambassador of Sweden to Mexico, and of course also Dr. William Potter and Ms. Paola Ramírez. Then Module 4 we'll talk about why states acquire nuclear weapons and why they give them up. Module 5 will be an interesting discussion on international law and nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Module 6 will focus on the IAEA, the role of safeguards, and of ABAC, especially in the Latin American and Caribbean region. Module 7 will focus on the role of nuclear weapon-free zones, and I'm particularly pleased that we have the Secretary General of OPANAL here, who will be the key speaker at that session. Ambassador Bonzanini, we're looking forward to your remarks. And then Module 8, we'll have a very topical discussion on probably the two biggest concerns at the moment in the nuclear non-proliferation field, and that is on Iran and North Korea, featuring Mr. Mark Fitzpatrick from the International Institute of Strategic Studies. Module 9 will focus on new tools that we here at CNS have developed, and two of our colleagues will be talking about that. Moving to July 14th, another very interesting panel. We'll hope to have someone from the CTBTO talk to you on the work of the organization, and also give you some insights in what it actually looks like in the operations room. Module 11 will feature Dr. Nikolai Sokov, who will talk about the status and prospects of nuclear arms control. And then I think one of the highlights, as far as I also think, is the Module 12, which will focus on the TPNW, also including Ms. Ramírez, and as well as Ms. Beatrice Finn, obviously the Executive Director of ICANN, and a young colleague from a former CNS Fellow, Mr. Pablo Ineken. And I'm also very pleased that my young colleague, Ms. Nomsa Ndongwe, agreed to moderate that panel. And then just to draw it, and then the final substantive session is on nuclear security and the prevention of nuclear terrorism, and that's on Thursday, July 16th. And then we will have a breakout sessions for participants to discuss and consider what are the biggest threats to the nuclear non-proliferation disarmament regime and what to do about them. And then on the final day, we'll feature a really interesting and very important panel, and that's the role of women in changing the discourse in nuclear arms control and disarmament, featuring a number of prominent women in the field. And I really look forward to that event. Finally, the ceremony to conclude the school will be held on Friday the 17th. And the speakers that we will hear from this morning will join us to conclude the 2020 online course. So with that, Paola, I'm going to ask you to moderate the opening session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing well and healthy. I am Paola Ramírez. I'm in charge of Disarmament, Non-proliferation and Arms Control Affairs here at the Directorate General for the United Nations. And as mentioned earlier by Jan, I will co-host this summer school, which we hope you will enjoy and learn a lot from it. I'm also honored to present our distinguished speakers for this opening session. First, we hear from Ms. Delgado Peralta, Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights from the Secretariat of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. Secondly, we'll hear from our Director General of Matías Romero Institute, Mr. Alejandro Alday González. Then from Ambassador Flávio Roberto Bonzanini, Secretary General of the Agency for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean. And finally, we'll hear from Dr. William Potter, Founding Director of the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies. Without any delay, I give the floor to Mrs. Delgado Peralta, Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights, to open this course and give the welcoming remarks. Thank you.
No quiere la bandera.
No le conozco.
Ahí está. Ya.
Muy buenos días desde la Ciudad de México, Mr. Jan Preez, the Senior Program Manager for Education and Training at the James Martin Center of Non-proliferation Studies. Muy distinguido maestro Alejandro Alday, qué gusto saludarte, el director general del Instituto Matías Romero. Ambassador Flávio Roberto Bonzanini, Secretary General of the Agency for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, y Dr. William Potter, Founding Director of the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies. Todos muy bienvenidos. Desde aquí queremos darles la bienvenida y a esta edición 2020 de la Escuela de Verano sobre Desarme Nuclear y No Proliferación. Good morning, dear participants and experts. It is my pleasure to extend to all of you the warmest welcome of the summer school and non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament for diplomats in Latin America and the Caribbean. First of all, on behalf of the Mexican government, I would like to express our gratitude of the Agency for Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies, and the Matías Romero Institute for their invaluable support in the organizing of this edition of the summer school under the current situation. It is a very special occasion for us. As a promoter of international peace and security, Mexico strives for a system of collective security, both functional and sustainable, a system based on international law and ethical principles, which are very important for us. Mexico is convinced that education in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation constitutes the most useful and essential tool to achieve the elimination of weapons of mass destruction, and as well as a crucial means in which we may strengthen international, regional, and national peace. So the Mexican Minister of Foreign Affairs, Marcelo Ebrard, stated during his address at the 74th UN General Assembly that Mexico has reignited its will of being a part of the solution in the most pressing challenges that humanity faces, and its commitment with greatest causes. So we are deeply committed with this statement. Mexico is also very committed with the multilateral system and shares the conviction that international rules-based system constitute the most effective way to face the current challenges of humanity, which no country can face on its own. So the shift in government vision translates in Mexico's participation in the multilateral arena as a transformative multilateral foreign policy is built in 7 different axes. The transformative multilateral policy represents the projection of these values towards the rest of the world, reaffirming our commitment to multilateralism. One of those 7 axes of this new policy is throughout an unwavering commitment to shift the focus towards building truly sustainable peace as a precondition of all other aspects of human development. We undoubtedly consider disarmament and nuclear proliferation as one of the cornerstones for achieving this objective. And in particular, our region of Latin America and the Caribbean has played an historic leadership role in raising awareness on nuclear disarmament. So its commitment to this common objective was realized with the groundbreaking entry into force of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean in 1969. That is best known as the Treaty of Tlatelolco. Mexico is always very proud to belong to the first nuclear weapon-free zone, which contributed to the effective establishment of other nuclear weapons-free zones. So for Mexico has been also important that for years we have been engaged in promoting education for peace and disarmament. Our country has collaborated with the most relevant organizations at regional and multilateral level. The United Nations Study of Disarmament and Non-proliferation Education, proposed by Mexico in 2000 and presented by the UN in 2002, is centered on the need to study the reduction and elimination of arsenals as means to reduce both the possibility and the severity of armed conflicts. At the same time, it analyzes ways to incorporate that strand of education in post-conflict scenarios as a contribution to the consolidation of peace, and request all states to include disarmament and non-proliferation education as an integral part of the future generations' education. In this spirit, Mexico has promoted the full application of the recommendations contained in the United Nations study by promoting the adoption of resolutions of the UN General Assembly every 2 years. Those resolutions recognize the urgent need to promote disarmament and non-proliferation education at all levels. Our government is aware, though, of this importance of education and training to develop the national capabilities in its light of its conviction and commitment that the summer school seeks to offer to diplomats and the new generation of experts in the region the necessary tools to contribute to the achievement and maintenance of a nuclear weapons-free world. This summer school is a space for analysis, discussion, and exchange of ideas and perspective of the problems and challenges posed by nuclear weapons and some possible ways to face them and contribute to achieve nuclear disarmament. Finally, I am certain that this summer school will be an enriching professional and personal experience for all. I hope also that it may contribute to develop a passion for nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, so every one of you could foster cooperation in this field and in our region, and to contribute to achieve our common objective of a world free of nuclear weapons. Welcome again, enjoy and take active part in the virtual discussions that the pandemic imposes nowadays. And I wish you all the best on this summer school, and thank you. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary, for your welcoming remarks. And now I give the floor to Mr. Alejandro Alday González, Director General of Matías Romero Institute. Please, Mr. Alday, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. At the outset, I want to welcome to all the participants to this summer school for disarmament and non-proliferation from the Matías Romero Institute. We are glad to join efforts with the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies, as well as with the OPANAL and the UN community in order to bring students this course that goes from history of institutions, how they are working nowadays, and the challenges that are posing these topics nowadays to the international agenda. We believe, as the Undersecretary has pointed out, in the multilateralism in Mexico, and from the Institute we can provide a number of materials and papers that can support your studies and current discussions within the course. Please visit online the campus that we have in the institute. You have granted an access to it for this 2 weeks course, and we will be glad to have discussions with you around all the topics of the agenda. Sadly, we cannot make it in person in Mexico City this year, but this is a great opportunity also to exchange a number of materials for this course. It's the program, as you have seen, is complete, and we believe it's a great time to study these topics, given the challenges that we have in international agenda nowadays. We have seen from the different topics in the Security Council and the nationalism countries are having problems with it, but what we want is to contribute from our region that is had in his heart, in the heart of the foreign policy of this region, these topics, to contribute to international discussions in the non-proliferation and disarmament. So please be welcome again to the course, and from the Matías Romero Institute, we will be supporting all what you need, and I thank you for this invitation, and I'll see you in Module 5 with the International Law next Thursday. Thank you very much, Paola, for this invitation.
Mr. Alday, for your remarks. Now I give the floor to Ambassador Flávio Roberto Bonzanini, Secretary General of the Agency for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean. Please, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Paola, and good morning to all the colleagues, all the participants. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this morning. Distinguished colleagues, distinguished participants, it's my pleasure to welcome you at the 2020 online Latin American and Caribbean Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Summer School. I'd like to thank the Mexican Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Matías Romero Institute, and James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies for organizing this 5th edition of the Summer School, the initiative which I consider a significant contribution of our region to the UN Resolution 7359, United Nations Study on Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Education. I am sure that during the next 2 weeks, our participants will learn a lot about the nuclear safety and security, arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation, international organizations which work on reducing the nuclear threat, the role of the zones free of nuclear weapons, and many others from our distinguished speakers. By establishing the first in the world zone free of nuclear weapons in a densely populated area, the Treaty of Tlatelolco has served as a model for all future nuclear weapon free zone agreements. Dear participants, you should be proud of being part of the Latin American and Caribbean Diplomatic Corps, which during the last 53 years have been contributing to the international peace and security, and thus has demonstrated its full commitment to work for a nuclear weapon-free world. I wish you all fruitful and insightful discussions during the summer school. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your remarks. To close this opening session, I have the honor to give the floor to Dr. William Potter, founding director of the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies. Dr. Potter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paola. I hope you can hear me. We had a number of, we're having an echo there. Let me see, I'm going to turn one of the, I've got different monitors here. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, very good. So let me also extend my welcome on behalf of the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey to all of the participants in this 6th summer school organized jointly by CNS, the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, OPANAL, and in cooperation with Matías Romero Institute. It's been my honor and pleasure to participate in all of the preceding summer schools, and I'm only sorry that this year we must conduct the meeting online. I've always enjoyed visiting Mexico City, reuniting with many old friends, meeting new ones, and visiting some of the marvelous cultural attractions and restaurants, which also were highlights of our summer school in the past. This year will be different, but thanks to the hard work of my colleagues, and particularly Mr. Jean Dupree, I believe you have an exceptionally rich program with leading experts and policymakers from around the world. It's fitting that we have this summer school in Mexico City, as Mexico has always been a leader in promoting disarmament and non-proliferation education. It is also a subject to which I've devoted my professional life, and I was very pleased and privileged to work on this subject with Miguel Marin Bosch, one of the most distinguished Mexican diplomats, when we both served together on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Affairs. And in fact, that is where the idea for the initiative on disarmament and non-proliferation education was born. I remember during the first summer when we convened the school in Mexico City, Miguel was there with me and expressed amazement, as only Miguel could express amazement, that his own government, in cooperation with a Yankee academic institution, had actually succeeded in doing something so meaningful. He was really astonished that this idea had, in fact, been realized in the form of our summer school. Miguel is no longer with us, but I like to think that our work at the summer school serves as a tribute to his foresight and perseverance. Since John has only allotted me half of the normal time for my opening lecture, which will come quite shortly, I'm not going to say more by way of a welcome, but instead we'll ask him to give me an additional 3 minutes for my lecture later this morning. So I'll wind up my remarks at this moment in time. It's a tremendous pleasure to participate again in this important summer school. I look forward to interacting with many of my old friends who are gathered here and meeting many new ones. Thank you.
I would like to thank again to our distinguished speakers for their welcoming remarks. Now, I give the floor to my co-host, Jean Dupré, to moderate the next segment, in which we will have the honor to listen to messages from heads of international organizations. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paola, and also thank you for the welcoming remarks. And yes, Dr. Potter, I will add a few more minutes to your lecture. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce the two heads of international organizations, and it's really unique for them to be with us this morning, and I wish to thank them both from the outset for making time available. Both of them do not need to be introduced, but out of courtesy, I will briefly introduce, firstly, the United Nations Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu. She assumed the position of Undersecretary General and High Representative on 1st of May 2017. Prior to taking up this post, she served as Assistant Administrator of the Crisis Response Unit at the United Nations Development Program. She has many, many years experience within and outside the UN, and we are really honored to have her here, and I must say she is one of the most inspirational speakers that I've had the pleasure to listen to. Following her remarks, we will have the honor to listen to Ambassador Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA. Of course, Ambassador Grossi needs, in particular in the context of this course, very little introduction, but I will just mention that he became the IAEA Director General in October of last year, after spending many years in the IAEA in the Director General's office. But Rafael Grossi is a career veteran diplomat, served in many positions, and since joining the Argentine Foreign Ministry in the mid-80s. I am distinctly honored to introduce both speakers, and I ask after Ms. Nakamitsu speaks that Ambassador Grossi immediately follow with his remarks. Undersecretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duprez, for that exceedingly kind introduction. I'm so happy to be here today, and especially to see all of my friends and colleagues and comrades in Disarmament. Good morning from New York. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am really honored to address this year's class of the summer school on non-proliferation and disarmament for Latin American and the Caribbean diplomats. The need for education about the importance of disarmament and non-proliferation to the maintenance of international peace and security is as great as it has ever been. And I think we all agree on that point. Deteriorating relations between nuclear armed states have seen a resurgence in the role nuclear weapons play in national security doctrines and strategies. At the same time, the nuclear arms control regime is disintegrating. So together, these factors have raised the risk of nuclear weapon use, either deliberately or by accident, or most likely by miscalculation, if you will, to really unacceptable levels. In such a climate, we need voices that understand the tangible security benefits disarmament provides, not least to building confidence, increasing transparency, and reducing risk. The elimination of nuclear weapons is the UN's highest disarmament priority. Why? Because nuclear weapons, along with climate change, represents one of the two existential threats to the planet, and because any use of nuclear weapon would be a humanitarian catastrophe. Through the Secretary General, the United Nations is a staunch advocate for a world without nuclear weapons. We work with UN member states to reduce risks, find common ground, and get the international community back on the pathway to the total elimination of these inhumane and catastrophic weapons. For example, the UN supports the President-designate of the forthcoming review conference of the Treaty on the Non-proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or better known as the NPT, in his efforts to secure a successful outcome that will strengthen the treaty. And I think it's really, really important. The review conference represents a significant opportunity to take steps towards a more secure world, and the UN is committed to helping states parties achieve that outcome. The UN works with member states to reinforce the historic gains made in disarmament, including the norm against nuclear testing, underpinned by the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Protecting that norm and ensuring it through the CTBT's entry into force should be a priority for all states. Our member states share these concerns. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW, represents the majority of UN's desire for urgent progress in the elimination of nuclear weapons. As the Secretary General has said, when that treaty enters into force, it will become an important part of the international disarmament regime. At the current pace of ratifications, this could be within the next year. Latin America and the Caribbean have long and storied history of support for nuclear disarmament, including as the first region to have a nuclear weapon-free zone. It is a proud tradition that you, younger generation, have inherited. You really should be proud of that. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed in his agenda for disarmament, young people are the ultimate force for change and have proved their power time and again in support of the cause of disarmament. It is important and positive contribution that young people can make in sustaining peace was reaffirmed by the UN General Assembly in last year, 2019, by adopting its new resolution on youth disarmament and non-proliferation. This is why in the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, we are stepping up our youth engagement across the spectrum of our activities. We want to increase youth participation and create space for young people to make meaningful, substantive contributions to facilitating progress on disarmament. My office is engaging, educating, empowering young people through an outreach initiative, and it's called Youth for Disarmament, hashtag Youth for Disarmament, under which various resources, including e-newsletters, training programs, and dedicated youth websites are made available. We recently selected 10 United Nations Youth Champions for Disarmament from diverse professional and geographic backgrounds to participate in a program designed to empower young people to work for disarmament in their communities. And our flagship training program, the UN Disarmament Fellowship, of course, continues to bring young diplomats like yourselves together and provide them with access to and understanding of the many forums, organizations, and instruments that make up the disarmament regime. I really firmly believe that the continued relevance of multilateralism and international cooperation depends on how we create space for young people to fully participate. At the turning point of UN 75, I am convinced that an important element of responsible leadership is to equip young people with knowledge and skills, but also to provide opportunities for them to innovate and develop new ways to reduce threats from weapons. As diplomats, you will be the generation of global citizens that develops the ethical, moral, security, and legal frameworks for the future. I am confident that it is a role that you will excel in. I wish you all the very best for your program, and thank you very much for listening.
Good afternoon and good morning to all of you, dear friends participating in the summer school this year. It is a great pleasure for me to take part in this very prestigious annual rendezvous that all of those dealing from different sides of the non-proliferation and disarmament community, so to speak, participate. I'm very grateful, and it's a great pleasure to see friends, of course, from the James Martin Center, Bill, Jean, and others there, and all my Mexican friends, starting with Marta, who with whom I had the immense honor to partake in my taking of oath at the IAEA when I assumed my duties last year, since Mexico is at the moment exercising the presidency of the General Conference of the IAEA. Those speaking before me, including the Undersecretary Izumi, whom I salute from here, have said very pertinent things that have to do with the importance of the issues you are studying and about education. My angle in these very, very brief remarks to you intends not to repeat, but rather to add a little bit to what has been said and to what you heard. The work and the uniqueness, if you want, of the contribution of the International Atomic Energy Agency is that, as I have sometimes said, in this agency or through this agency, we bring to life some of the most important commitments that you study or you are analyzing. It is the IAEA who puts into and brings to reality the non-proliferation system that we have and we have benefiting from for the last 50 years, at least, through a very complex system of inspections, verifications, and in the jargon that we use, safeguards. But it is also through the IAEA that the equally important work of technical cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy is carried out. And this is very important because in an area of such sensitivity, the work, the handling of nuclear material, nuclear expertise, nuclear technology can only be done in a way that does not or never would contribute to the hostile or proliferating use of all these things at our disposal. So the agency mobilizes resources and puts this at the service of the international community to make sure that all these activities are carried out in a safe, secure, and non-proliferating way. We are living in a world where a number of factors converge. Undersecretary Nakamitsu was referring to the disarmament themes, and I am sure you will be listening to more of this from our own perspective. It is the other side of this very important task, the non-proliferation side, the avoidance of the widening of the circle of countries that have nuclear weapons, which is of the essence. And this is an issue that requires these resources that we were talking about. Of course, when it comes to Latin America, my region, your region, we do have a proud heritage and a tradition that it has been there for more than half a century, and that you, as the new generation, receiving the torch of the preceding ones, working in this area, must bring and decline into the realities of the day. The non-proliferation and disarmament mosaic and situation at the present time is ever changing and differs from the one that we may have had just a few years ago. This is an area where there are constant new challenges, and some challenges that continue throughout the years, and they require from us a solid knowledge of the basic normative, theoretical basis for our work. And I take it that the summer school is one of the most prestigious courses that you can have to strengthen that knowledge that some of you, I suppose, already have and are going to continue to be honing in the future. I myself, I'm a beneficiary of that. Izumi was referring to the UN fellowship. I myself am a fellow, class of 1986. So there is life after, and good one after the, so I never forgot what I learned as a fellow. And here I am. And it's the same, this tradition, these principles that were transmitted to those young diplomats in the mid-80s that have armed us in a relatively decent way, I suppose, to face the new ones. So you are the ones that are going to be taking this exercise, and you are going to be having these responsibilities in the future. But you are not going to be able to do it right if you don't have a clear and wide idea of the present and the current threats and the current challenges that we have. That are plentiful. In the area of disarmament, you will hear from those who have an expertise in that area, but you know that we have this pending issue of the overall objective of a world free from nuclear weapons. In my area of responsibility, non-proliferation, we have ongoing issues. We have issues that we were able to solve. In many hotspots in the planet, non-proliferation threats never materialized. And this was possible through the united, I would say, will and efforts of political decision makers at home, but also institutions like OPANAL, like the IAEA, like ABAC in the case of Brazil, and Argentina in Latin America, Euratom, and others that came together providing this institutional basis for the work that needed to be done. And rightly so. When you analyze the current international agenda, you see that as far as non-proliferation is concerned, we still have important issues that are there. They are very concrete. They have to do with situations like, for example, the nuclear program in Iran or in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and in other parts where the agency is actually engaged, and you see it in the front lines of the newspapers. And this is why diplomats need to master all these factors, all these elements, all these realities, which present, as I said, a normative side, but also in the case of nuclear, at least a highly technical side that you need to be conversant with, at least in its basic principles, lest you don't grasp the multiple sides of factors when you're looking into safeguards, into inspections, into all of these things. It is very important that you do master the basic notions of what is at stake. And this is why efforts like this are so important and need to be sustained. The IAEA tries also to contribute to this educational effort, not only by my humble contribution to this course, but through our technical cooperation program, we are providing our member states. We have 171, so a very large membership, which is ever growing, with the basic elements that they need to have to navigate these difficult waters that we have in front of us these days. Let me add maybe another dimension which I believe is very important and has to do with the importance of having an integral composition of the human workforce working in this. And this has to do with gender and gender parity, which in education and education for disarmament and non-proliferation is very important, because this profession has traditionally been male dominated. We have at the helm of the UN disarmament efforts a distinguished lady, but it's not the predominant factor. This is why the IAEA has a couple of months ago introduced a worldwide program of fellowship, the Marie Sklodowska-Curie fellowship, which is going to be helping us train more young women in nuclear science and technologies. We are going to be awarding a first batch of 100 fellows that are going to be, I wouldn't say educated, but we will be able to continue to be educated for a postgraduate level in nuclear science, technology, nuclear security, and so on and so forth. So to conclude my initial remarks, I would say non-proliferation and disarmament are essential for peace, stability, and security in the world, but we need the right kind of people. We need those negotiators who are able to conduct the indispensable processes that are going to be making this world a safer one. So this is why every effort to help you in this phase in your careers is so important. And this is why the IAEA feels proud to partake in this effort. I wish you all the best. The IAEA will support you in any possible way in the future. Thank you very much for having me, and have a very successful course this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Grossi, and thank you very much, Undersecretary General Nakamitsu, for your inspiring words. I picked up a few things that I just want to highlight before we wrap up the opening session. The Undersecretary General highlighted the important role of youth and the important work that the Office of Disarmament Affairs and the United Nations are doing to empower and enrich the knowledge of the next generation of leaders, both at national level, international level, as well as in civil society. I was also struck with her remarks about the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. The very diplomats that are sitting in this course will take the United Nations to its centennial. This is one effort to empower and make sure that we have the right mix of leaders. Ambassador Grossi, I neglected to mention that you were a product of the United Nations Disarmament Fellowship, a program that I've been proud to contribute over the years, and I'm so pleased that it is still going from strength to strength. I am convinced that in the group of almost 70 participants from Latin America and the Caribbean, there must be a woman that will be the next Director General of the IAEA. I cannot see why not. So I really thought your final comment there about gender parity was extremely important, and thank you for highlighting that. And I wish you well, I think on behalf of everyone, with the task that both the IAEA and the United Nations have ahead of you. Thank you so much for making time available to join us today. We're really proud to have you with us.